Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Blaze the Cat here, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos, as you probably expected me at this point in time. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance version as a remake. So yeah, last time, we've essentially did manage to traverse ourselves into the third world in this particular version of the game, taking place in Cotton Top Cove. And oh no, we actually did that world pretty good, except on the boss fight, because I died about, I would say 2 or 3 times, mainly because of this very unpredictable attack pattern, where it comes to more specifically trying to get blown away by the force of that particular squirt of the water. So no matter what though, aside from all that stuff though, we did that world pretty good actually. So yeah, as a result, unlike the forms of how it does on the Super Nintendo original version, thanks to Sonic the Hedgehog, he obviously attempts able to go into Mekanos on World 3, and as far as World 4 is concerned, he obviously did manage to went into Cotton Top Cove for World 4. But now we somehow deal with Cotton Top Cove in World 3 in this particular version of the game. So yeah, you can pretty much get the idea about the specific comparison within not only the Super Nintendo original, but in addition to the Game Boy Advance version as a remake, so you can definitely get the idea we're about to be going for those levels in a different way. So because of that, yeah, speaking of which, is that today for this video, as you can see on screen, we're about to be going into World 4 in the Game Boy Advance version of Donkey Kong Country 3, and this time we're going into Mekanos. So this place is going to be filled to the brim with a lot of factory facility kind of levels like this one, and on top of that, there's also going to be some sewage levels here and there. So as a result though, everything else will become to expect at this point in time. Ah, dang, I somehow got screwed up right there, but that's okay, because we can essentially get ourselves Kiddy Kong back from that particular DK barrel after getting hit by that very unexpected depth perception with all that particular little cannon shots, as far as you can definitely tell from the background. So anywho, so yeah, a few things I want to talk about this is though, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date of course there is the 16th of November today, in some cases in 2025 today, so logically though, we're now on to the halfway point in terms of November already, before we move along to the 12th and the final month of 2025, and as of course, December. So because of that, well, this could be a perfect opportunity for the fact that we can able to actually decide to conclude the last couple of games during the Evolves event 2025 for this Let's Play department, just before we're able to actually dive into 2026 at some point. So because of that, but here's the thing though, is that obviously though is about the fact that, like I said before, that Silver will definitely going to be going back on playing through Mario Luigi Superstar Saga until next month in December. I don't know exactly when exactly, but stay tuned for that, especially because considering how he's actually gone through a lot of progressioning in terms of that game so far, so logically though is about the fact that we'll definitely try to figure this out, especially noticeable considering for the fact that at this point in time, we've just literally got about a couple of days left until we're about to be approaching ourselves into the 12th and the final month, and also we got a couple of days left until we're about to be fastly approaching into the brand new year, 2026. So yeah, aside from all that stuff though, that's as far as I can really say about this. And it's also worth knowing for too, we just literally got about 4 more days left until Kirby Air Riders for Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be releasing. So because of that, and speaking of which though, when it comes to Kirby Air Riders, but not just that, also say applies to the forms of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, because as far as I'm aware, I believe, if I can recall correctly, we got about, let's just say, 18 more days to go until Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for not only for Nintendo Switch 1, but in addition to the Nintendo Switch 2 version is also going to be on its way too. So no matter what though, we pretty much come to expect to realize, not only do we get ourselves the overview trailer for Kirby Air Riders, but also say applies with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So no matter what though, I'm still basically excited for those last 2 games in particular, including Dragon Ball Sparking Zero for Nintendo Switch 2 version most likely to me though, because of the graphical fidelity, and not to mention though, despite the game is only going to be running on 30 frames per second, much like defaults of how it does it on, well, the majority of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi games, starting from the original on the PlayStation 2 and as well as 3, both on PlayStation 2 and Nintendo Wii. Although, mind you though, for the fact that when it comes to navigating menus, they all basically run at 60 frames per second, whilst during in gameplay, they only run on 30 frames per second. So because of that, and a quick honorable mention for the sake of the Forza Tenkaichi Tag Team for the PlayStation Portable, and gee, I can't even believe it's been 15 years ago since not only does Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi Tag Team first came out on the PlayStation Portable, but same as the Forza Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. So because of that, although I do remember that Silver did actually tell me about this back then, that we did manage to try out the demo version of Dragon Ball Raging Blast, not only Raging Blast 1, but in addition to Raging Blast 2 on its own time back in the day. That, I will have to admit it though, is that the controls might feel a bit clunky when it comes to more specifically trying to pull off some signature moves, likely from Kamehameha or KO Can Attack, and you pretty much get the idea of what this is going, because you have to physically try to able to let go of the actual one of those buttons as far as I'm aware. And unfortunately though, if you couldn't tell already, I accidentally died on the final stretch of the level, but that's mainly because of, you know, hesitation and stuff. So anywho, but hopefully we can able to try again, hopefully, but without any some sort of major errors and all that stuff. And still, like I said before, we actually briefly went through the majority of the worlds in Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance, a lot more of a total breeze, because, you know, like I said before, unlike Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Game Boy Advance, sometimes though that Silver did indeed manage to go into two different parts in between, because obviously though, for the fact that we just want to able to actually get these minigames done and stuff like that, so, and I'm still gonna have to save up for those little minigame challenges at some point, specifically that utilizes hovercrafting and all that stuff, until for later, because obviously though we do need to able to actually complete the majority of any other stages first, so, but that's essentially how I roll with this, so. But anyway, because straight to the point though is about the fact that I also did found out that when it comes to obtaining trophies or achievements in both Dragon Ball Raging Blast and Raging Blast 2, they are a little bit more difficult to obtain when it comes to getting every single trophies and achievements in those two games in particular, because I did recently double check in the forms of any other websites. They did say 9 out of 10 difficulty, meaning it's going to be a little bit more tougher when it comes to likely trying to get those trophies / achievements, depending on what system you own. So no matter what though, is about the fact that I'm also give the PlayStation and, you know, Xbox versions of those games a pass, because obviously though I'm still looking forward to trying out, you know, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero until, you know, we'll save that up and join at some point in this year's Christmas. So, just want to give you guys a little bit of a heads up, especially because that way, specifically on the Switch 2 version, I can at least manage able to maybe try out the online functionality without need to worry about paying the ridiculous amount of money when it comes to not only PlayStation Plus subscription, but in addition to Xbox Gold Pass in regards to the forms of online subscription services, because it is so outrageously expensive these days compared to the forms of how it does it for Nintendo Switch Online, not only for its standard version, but as well as the expansion pack version as well. Just because no matter what though, there are likely cheaper alternatives, especially because considering for the fact that, well, obviously though, that still, I'm going to go after the Switch 2 version of, you know, Sparking Zero, despite with this infamous physical game keycard format, just because, well, it did usually say it does require 20 gigabytes of download. So at least that's not by much in comparison to the upcoming Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate for Nintendo Switch 2. So relatively speaking, that was about the fact that at least I'm gonna be perfectly okay in terms of trying to able to actually go after the yet another physical game at some point in this year's Christmas, well, at least after Kirby Air Riders for Nintendo Switch 2, so that way I can able to actually get the game day one, because I do remember that Shadow, as far as I'm aware, did tell me that we still got ourselves the original Kirby Air Ride for the GameCube for a pretty decent price, with the forms of a really good condition as far as I do realize. But every nowadays though, the game is skyrocketing in pricing these days, with incomplete in box and everything, so it's now go up to like £150 or £200 these days, which I'm just like, well, it's a good thing we somehow still got the game since 2018 of all years, because, well, Save Plus the forms of Klonoa Door to Phantomile for the PlayStation 1, so no matter what though, we can pretty much expect to realize that every nowadays retro video gaming these days is now going to get a bit of a problematic when it comes to obtaining every single one of them in regards to the forms that stupid price tags, so, but either way. But, fortunately though, there are some good news I'd like to point things out in regards to the forms of not only for Steam, but in addition to that though, some more Pokemon stuff you know as well. Like for instance though, is that obviously though, they also managed able to bring up the overview trailer for the likes of the forms of Pokemon Pokepodia, I think it's what it says anyway, despite the fact that, you know, that game is, you know, pretty much just Animal Crossing, but with Pokemon themed, and also infamously out of them all though is that the physical version is locked up behind a stupid game keycard, as you probably would expect. So because of that, not too surprising, all things considered, which that's the reason why that Pokemon fans are pretty much worried at this point in time, just because imagine this, right, if they did somehow listed game keycards for the upcoming Pokemon Generation 10 games, and no matter what though, if they mention about the game keycard, oh man, that could be a total dumpster fire with all that physical game collectors, because even then, because you know, it's even bad enough with all that game keycards has already been infamous as it stands, but nothing compares to the forms of how it does it for some Switch 1 games, like specifically third-party supportive Switch 1 games, to be more specifically, because sometimes you're able to actually come across into a physical game, you'll be like, oh, awesome, but then you realize it's usually able to pay close attention to the, well, the bottom right corner of the cover, it did say, download code only, and as a result, yeah, that's a bit of a rip-off, don't you think? Especially the worst example being, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4 on specifically the Switch 2 version, because even then, despite the fact that the physical game cards do usually have like 64 gigabytes capacity, so no matter what though, it's about the fact that it is a little bit baffling for some consumers out there. So, but anyway, as you can see, we're getting chased by the forms that ginormous Starblade, and what I thought was a little bit odd about this version is that the music track choice in this level, it doesn't really fit. I gotta say about this right about now, because unlike the original Super Nintendo version, it did manage to fit the soundtrack nice and, you know, quite intense in some scenarios, but on the Game Boy Advance version, it doesn't sound right on this particular level specifically, because obviously you're getting chased by the actual ginormous Saw Blade, so no matter what though, it doesn't feel like it's gonna match up to the bones of how it does in the Super Nintendo original, so... Well, that's just me, but either way, let's go and go after the yet another B coin right there. So we got 36 so far. So logically though, is about the fact I'm pretty guaranteed for the fact that we're pretty much at the halfway point almost. In terms of trying to collect the majority of those B coins, although straight to the point though, we do need a lot of them this time around compared to the Super Nintendo version, because obviously though, there's that one specific special extra world that's only exclusive onto the Game Boy Advance version, which I'll talk more about that if we somehow conclude this world, so... And it's also worth knowing for too, is that in order able to actually access this extra world that's only exclusive to this version, is that we need to complete World 1, 2, 3, and 4 first in order able to actually proceed into not only K3, but in addition to Razor Rage, and on top of that, the extra worlds, like I mentioned earlier. So because of that, again, we'll discuss more about that until later. So for now, let's go ahead and try to be very, very, very quick about this. Ah, dang it. Oh well. There's a steel barrel, so we can able to take down this enemy right here to proceed into yet another bonus area. So, at least thankfully though, if we manage to able to get into the bonus area like this for collecting those green bananas, we become invincible while doing with the bones that ginormous Saw Blade. So that way you don't necessarily try to get yourself screwed over like over and over and over again with some little bit of a, well, you get the idea for that point. So, anywho though, There's also another thing I also want to point out too, sorry for a little bit of a tongue twisting in the end, folks. There's actually not 1, not 2, but 3 upcoming projects for the sake of the phones of Steam. So no matter what though, they did manage to able to announce, well, they've already did manage to briefly recap upon the most recent device, which appears to be Steam Deck, and so much to the point, for the fact that most any other people out there fully appreciate they somehow managed able to purchase that device, despite the fact that it's pretty darn expensive at first glance though anyway. So I'm very grateful to report you guys, is that obviously though Steam has just announced not only 1 but 3 brand new devices are about to be coming, specifically until next year in 2026. Specifically, early 2026. So, for instance though, they're going to be revealing the Steam controller, so no too surprising for the sake of time. So no matter what though, I got nothing else to say about it. But the other 2 devices on the other hand are pretty interesting. So, next up we have is Steam Machine, which, as to be expected, is almost like a cube-shaped console. And no matter what though, it does look pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. The only thing I was a little bit worried about and concerned about is the price tag, because at this point in time, game consoles, as well as Steam Deck, as far as you can definitely tell, it's going all over the place when it comes to price tags, as be expected, which that's the reason why I attempt to able to ignore getting the Steam Deck, because I've heard so many good things about it, and most of the time, not so great stuff compared to the forms of how it does it on, well, let's just say for Switch 2, for instance, or Nintendo Switch 1, to be more specifically to me, though, because in Switch 2 and Switch 1, if you manage to be able to get the game, specifically the first-party game, likely, for example, Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario Galaxy, plus Super Mario Galaxy 2, that if you boot up the game, well, to be more specifically, either digital or physical version, that if you do manage to able to insert those games in, at the very least though, you can able to actually did indeed manage to able to actually access those games without any some sort of waiting times. Whilst on Steam Deck sometimes, and say applies the forms of PlayStation systems, or Xbox systems for that matter, sometimes though you have to wait until the actual update has been fully updated, with all that required download and all that stuff, which I totally get because of the forms of the day 1 patch and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's besides the point. So, anyway, so if you couldn't tell already, for the fact that we've already technically come across into Squidder the Spider since in the previous level earlier ago, well, because of that though, that Squidder the Spider does make a return since Donkey Kong Country 2. For not only for the Super Nintendo version, but in addition to the Game Boy Advance version as well. And a quick honorable mention when it comes to Donkey Kong Land 2 and Donkey Kong Land 3, if I could recall. I mean, mind you though, it's been a very long while since I actually have last played Donkey Kong Land trilogy of games, because you know, ever since in 2021 at the very end, at the very least, that we already did done Donkey Kong Land 1, thanks to Mighty, and then meanwhile for Donkey Kong Land 2, I believe Ray did somehow manage to tackle for that, if I'm assuming so anyway, and I don't really know about the bones of Donkey Kong Land 3, because mind you though, for the fact that we're, at the very least though, we've already accomplished those games back in 2021 and 2022 respectively, and then nowadays though, we are about to be focusing on the Game Boy Advance versions of the Donkey Kong Country games. So, well, apart from you know, the Game Boy Color version of Donkey Kong Country 1. So, because of that, though, we'll get into more details about that at some point. So, anyway, so you do need to activate the Steel Barrel switch to able to get that coin enemy out of the way. So, just in case about the fact that with regular barrels, we're not able to actually get a lot more effective on this. So, that's one way to put it this way. So, anyway, so I'm not exactly sure what's up with that particular sprite switch over there. I'm guessing that we can able to just, well, change it into just plain barrels instead of explosive barrels, I'm pretty sure, like TNT barrels, if I could recall. I mean, mind you though, I didn't pay attention to the surroundings as much, but that's mainly because I want to try to focus on this from now on. So, and eventually the game starts to get a little bit difficult later on, as per expected. So because of that, no too surprising when it comes to likely the very beginning of the game starts off very easily, and then until later on it gets a bit tough and difficult. So, anyways, let's go and try to jump over for these TNT barrels, like so. Oh, jeez. Ah, dang it. I lost Dixie because of that particular unexpected movements right there. But hopefully we could time this just right without even getting hit by a TNT barrels. So, yeah, and watch out for the cramp traps as well. And I think we actually almost at the final stretch of this level, so as long as we do need able to still try to find. Actually, kind of think about it, is there the last bonus area to be found around here somewhere? I mean, if that's the case, then we can obviously try to able to investigate while we do with all that. So my guess is that if we use Dixie's ponytail, yep, there's the second and the final bonus area on this stage. So nicely done right here, and of course, as we expected, we can able to just find the coin itself. Just got to do some continuous chain bouncing with all that, you know, a bunch of barrels on site. So either way, we're now up to 39 B coins. So how about that? So yeah, we're just literally at the final stretch of this level right now, and there's a bear coin in case if you're curious. But yeah, at some point later on though, I can definitely try to able to actually grind as many of those bear coins as I possibly could. Well, I've noticed there are some stages you can able to actually grind as many of those bear coins as you could, much like the Bones of how it does it in Donkey Kong Country 2, that you can able to try to farm one of those banana coins in one of the levels, so that's not going to be until specifically later on, that is. So, low G lap width. So basically though, it's another sewer level, and except this time that everything else goes all slow, and not to mention though, every time you jump ridiculously high. So this means we're on low gravity mode. So yeah, I guess that makes it a little bit more obvious that this level is actually indeed called low G lap width. So, oh boy, this is where the timing skill is key here, especially because okay. That's okay, because we got ourselves a little bit of a extra jump right there after getting hit, so. And I do generally believe, and it might be been possible if you could potentially try utilize the, you know, Dixie's ponytail if we managed able to land safely in some scenarios like this, but most of the time though it's just about the fact that the screen crunch sometimes might able to actually hinder your progress, or specifically though, trying to hinder your gameplay experience sometimes, which is especially noticeable in one of those examples being, you know, Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis for the Game Boy Advance, and not to mention though, Super Mario Advance, Super Mario Advance 2, Super Mario World, and also say applies with Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3, and of course, Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3, so. Oh jeez, timing is a little bit impeccable for this part, because if I mess this up, I have to redo the entire stage all over again, because I think the checkpoint is just nearby, so we can just essentially try to dodge these little boss stormers, as far as I usually attempt to call them. And there we go, midway point, so that's something. So, at the very least though, luckily we can able to come across into the purple version of this Squawk Parrot, which, I'm afraid to tell you, unlike the green variations, obviously though he does not shoot projectiles at enemies, so instead, he can able to still try to fly, but obviously though he does not have the ability to able to shoot out projectiles, unlike the green variations like I mentioned earlier, but it does have the ability to able to grab things, like barrels for instance, so anyway, so we now have 40 B coins, so nicely done. Oh boy, this is what things gets a little bit tricky, and dang it, oh well, whatever, but at the very least we got the checkpoint, so we don't have to necessarily try to worry about this too much. So anyway, let's try this again, and hopefully we should able to not screw this up again. So anyway, oh yeah, let's get into the forms of the last device that Steam did somehow announce, and that's what appears to be known as Steam Frame, which is basically like the virtual reality device of Steam company. So no matter what though, I've got nothing else to add about this, although I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be possible if I could potentially try to get myself the Steam machine, because relatively speaking, I was about the fact at this point in time that as far as we've already established that in the past, that at this point that Nintendo Switch 2 to me though will be my absolute final game console from now on, unless if Nintendo decide able to reveal something else very surprising, until specifically during the forms of the next couple of years to come, specifically either 2030 or I would classify as saying 2032 or something like that. I mean, it's a bit tricky to judge on that front, but that's mainly because, you know, we already got the Switch 2 just recently, so... And as a matter of fact, though, it's been, you know, 5 months since the Switch 2 did first launched, since, you know, just, since on the 5th of June, so... Anyway, I get the feeling there's a bonus area down there, but here's the catch. That particular enemy is going way too fast, so I have no choice but to take the invincibility frames right there. And logically, though, I can able to make my way to the bonus area, so... Yeah, that should be all good. And would you look at that, we actually got ourselves the green version of Squawks. So as a result, that way we should able to actually deal with those enemies like so. But yeah, I've got nothing else to say. In terms of the phones, those 3 upcoming Steam projects, such as of course the controller and the Steam machine, which it kind of reminds me like a mini version of Xbox Series X in terms of design and everything. But regardless of such though, you know, Steam, as far as the actual game company is concerned, it's all about digital only instead of having physical stuff. So yeah, I've got nothing else to say about that front either. So... Anyway, there's a steel barrel right down there, but I can't be bothered able to try to pick it up, though, because even now I just need to try to focus on this, because this level can be pretty tricky sometimes if you're not careful enough. Regardless of the forms those hazards, you definitely need to try to avoid at all costs, so... Anyway, so let's go through this way, so that we can get ourselves yet another bear coin. And launch ourselves with the actual barrel cannon. And I think the coin enemy is just around onto the left side, because I see there's a steel barrel right there. And we need to hit down just here. And that way we could... I messed it up. Oh well, that's okay, because the steel barrel's not far from here, I don't think, so... Alright, this should... Oh, shoot! No. That's not good. That seriously is not good at all, because if you do manage to carry something, your jump level is pretty low with all that. Well, you get the idea. So let's just try this again, and hopefully, without some sort of mistakes here. I mean, here's the thing though, I never attempt able to speedrun this level to me though, because, you know, your movement is also very slow too, so... Alright, there we go. So at least we've gone past for that. And now we just need to make our way to the very end of the level very, very carefully. Because, again, if I get touched by these little enemies right there, and obviously, though, you might have to restart the entire portion of the level. Well, at least assuming if you do activate the checkpoint that you will be okay. But it's just that sometimes patience is key here. So, anyway, so that's pretty much about it for this level. And, yeah, I suppose we should probably gonna be making our way to the next boss, which appears to be Chaos Cryptic. I think it's what it says anyway. So no matter what, though, we meet again with Chaos, but this time as on the Game Boy Advance hardware. So, yeah, we can pretty much expect to tell what this is going. So, anyway, and, I guess, those technically the last 2 things I want to discuss upon, actually. I generally surprised to forgot to mention about, is that, did you guys know, not only it's been 20 years ago since Pac-Man World 3 came out in 2005, but also, get this, happy 20th anniversary of Mario Kart DS for the Nintendo DS. And, yeah, while looking back on those 2 games in particular, that, according to what Sonic told me, that he obviously really do enjoy Mario Kart DS a lot back then, especially that, gee, it's been 20 years since that game first released in 2005, which, you know, time flies, as be expected. And not only that, when it comes to Pac-Man World 3, it is still my least favorite in terms of the Pac-Man World trilogy of games. So, because it involves a different approach, and not to mention though, the atmosphere just looks a bit kind of bleak in my opinion. And not only that though, is about the fact that we can pretty much expect to realize that the combat just feels a bit kind of repetitive at times. And not only that though, no wonder why. That game never saw light of day in Japan. I'm guessing it's most likely because of the forms of probably poor sales when it comes to Pac-Man World 3 compared to you know, the previous 2 outings back then, Pac-Man World 1 and 2, which, yeah, I guess no wonder why that we somehow already received a remake treatment within 2022 and 2025 respectively, within both Pac-Man World games, basically. So, but anyway, though, and, oh, jeez, I totally forgot about that particular, you know, fire the laser kind of moment, so. And, yeah, that's as far as I can really say in terms of the forms of today's topic at this point, guys. Although there's technically the final thing I want to discuss upon, that recently that not only does Nintendo, but also Illumination did somehow bring up yet another cool poster for the upcoming Super Mario Galaxy movie, and it is amazing, because not only we can able to see a poster that is actually going to be based off from the Sand Kingdom from Super Mario Odyssey, but also Mario and Luigi are both wearing a desert outfit, which is pretty cool, and it makes sense for this little desert environment itself is concerned. And not to mention though, most of these NPCs from the Sand Kingdom also makes an appearance. So yeah, I guess no wonder why that one of the brands, specifically Old Spice, did somehow manage to able to accidentally leak that since in the earliest point in 2025, but now it becomes reality. So because of that, yeah, I was very excited about that still. Especially because considering for the fact that still, it is rather nice that Luigi at least managed to able to actually get into more action this time, as opposed to the forms of how it does on the first film, that obviously though he got trapped in the actual cage. So anyway, we've now got the second ski part, so logically though, we can now able to actually create yet another part for the Minecraft. And this also means we can now able to actually access to not only 1, not 2, but 3 worlds to check out. So, for instance though, like I said before, we can either go into K3, or Wizard Ridge, or the brand new world that's only exclusive to the Game Boy Advance version, like I said before, which appears to be known as Specifica. So no matter what though, we'll check those out at some point. So for now, let's go and meet up with Funky Kong again to potentially try to able to make a, you know, yet another vehicle. So yeah, I guess there's nothing else I can really say at this point, guys. I mean, sure enough though, I would have liked to discuss upon more aspects in particular, like for instance though, for the fact that I think, relatively speaking though, I did somehow unfortunately missed out on the global test demo for Kirby Air Riders, but that's mainly because, again, I was just waiting until when the actual game actually properly comes out. So, and if you're probably wondering, what's up with these red X's right there? Well, that's just mainly because I haven't exactly completed those just yet. But then again, I'll be back for those at some point, so don't you guys worry about that. So for now, let's hop on to the third vehicle, which this means not only we can able to move a bit faster, but also, you know, with these waterfalls that we can't go through before, well, we now can if we manage to able to get our momentum going by trying to speed things up a notch. So anyway, so we can able to actually access to K3 or Razor Ridge, and then on the far left of the world map on a chromosphere, we're able to actually come across into the bonus world, like I said before, but we'll go into the forms of, well, from now on anyway, we should probably go on to K3 to start things off, because obviously though, that Christmas is just around the corner, so no matter what though, we'll just try to go for that particular Winter Wonderland themed world, K3, so anyway, so with that being said folks, is that we should probably end things up at this point right here, so join me next time for more of Let's Play of Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance version as a remake, is that we're going into the 5th world in this particular version of the game called K3. So, yeah, filled with a lot of snowy environments and stuff like that, so you can get the idea. So I'll see you guys until next weekend. Later, fellas.